call the Tuesday, January 21st,
Phil,
2000.
your mic isn't on.
Tuesday, January 21st, 2020, Selectmen's meeting to order. Would you please stand? We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we'd like to go to the public comment. We just ask that you raise your hand and state your name and address, please, for the record. Toby.
Toby Arsenian, 95 Granite Street. I attended the meeting of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. They were going through the various department submissions. Chief and largest among those is the DPW's request for $3 million only. It's not $3 million for improvements or repairs to the seawall. The various pieces were not in place, or at any rate not made clear to the satisfaction of all there, where the money was going to come from other than out of the taxpayers' pockets. During the course of the discussion, what would the appropriations would pay for, Joe Parisi referred to the 8,000 cubic yards of sand that have already been distributed along the beach as a drop in the bucket. I think that's significant because more money is being asked for beach nourishment, as it's called, and we're told it's a good thing. It leads to the obvious questions. How much of it is a good thing? How long is it going to go on? How much of it will be required? Is there ever a point at which we're done with it? I hope you'd be asking those questions before you approved such appropriations. And we're also told anytime the beach nourishment is trotted out that it's a pocket beach, meaning it has headlands at either end that contain the sand from on a longshore flow, not on and off, but along shore. Maybe there's a grain of truth in that, but not much more, because the Department of Public Works has pictures going back 50, 70 years and so forth of Long Beach, what it looked like, and there are pictures of the beach with the sand up 3 feet from the top of the wall. It's now 8 or 9 feet down. So all of that sand went out somewhere, and it didn't come back.
Anyone else? Hearing none, we'll go on to a certificate of appreciation for our animal control officer. I'm going to turn this over to Selectman George after, I think, Mark, do you want to?
What's this got to do with it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I was asked to put together an outline, a summary of the actual event that occurred, so you have some background on this incident that happened.
Mark, can you please, the
Sure.
microphone, just because it's on TV?
So I'm going to read directly from a report that was memorialized this important event that occurred in our town regarding the saving of one of our citizen animals. It's a great story. On November 5th of 2019, the Board of Selectmen appointed Diane Corliss to the position of Animal Control Officer. Since that time, actually the next day, she hit the ground running. As with most personnel associated with emergency services and first responders, we're extremely fortunate to have someone like Diane in this position. The reason we are here tonight is just another example of the high standards and admirable qualities that our employees display on a daily basis in service to the public. On Tuesday, December 17th, 2019, at approximately 8:15 p.m., Diane was contacted by the police department for a report of a missing dog. We get these reports fairly regularly. It was snowy, rainy, and cold on this night, and Diane was concerned for the dog's safety and well-being. She contacted the owners directly and came right to Rockport to investigate. The dog was identified as Mia, a golden retriever belonging to Mr. and Mrs. Cooney, who live centrally in the downtown area. Diane went and searched, checked all areas, met with the owners, posted on Facebook, and continuously searched the surrounding area all night. She then went back the next day and searched areas where Mia had been known to go and monitored the social media as well. She was concerned, worried, sick, continuously. We were going back and forth about this quite a bit. She was very upset and decided to go back the next morning and meet with Andrea Lucas, also familiar with the area and the dogs from past experience. It was a freezing cold day, and Diane checked the wharf and began searching the shoreline, now fearing the worst since it had been several days missing and Mia was prone to enter the water. She began at Back Beach and methodically came central to Bearskin Neck, and then T Wharf, parking and checking with binoculars, getting out of her car, checking with binoculars along the shoreline at each location. To her dismay and surprise, she spotted something on the far side, on the rocks below Atlantic Ave, and called Mia's name. Mia only had the ability to turn her head, and she moved, and she was located. She immediately notified all of our resources, police, fire, harbor master, and went to Mia's aid, climbing down the ladder. I think it was over 20 feet, 30 feet down to the rocks. Where she was, frozen and immobile, stuck on the rocks, not visible from houses or the streets. She never would have been found. She stayed with her, wrapped her in a blanket, and assisted in getting her to safety with the assistance of the fire department squad and Stokes bucket to bring her up to shore. She then transported her to the vet, staying with her the entire time to make sure she was healthy and to get medical attention. She took her to the new animal shelter at the transfer station, contacted the parents, and returned her to their care at 4 p.m. on Thursday, December 19th, 2019, alive and well. Select person Ruth George spearheaded this effort in recognizing Diane Corliss for her actions, supported and endorsed by the entire Board of Selectmen, and agreed she should be recognized for her efforts, which were well above and beyond the call of duty in these circumstances, and recognize her with an award of appreciation, certificate of appreciation. There is no doubt that with the weather conditions, location of Mia, and length of time missing, that had it not been for her efforts, the outcome would have been much different and very tragic. Diane is a credit to her profession and a valuable asset to the town, and her actions are worthy of our praise.
So Diane, I'd like to present you, Town of Rockport Board of Selectmen present the certificate of appreciation to Diane Corliss for her dedication and leadership in the search and rescue, I'm gonna get choked up, of missing dog Mia on December 18th, 2019, signed by Paul Murphy, Ruth George, Donald J. Campbell, Denise Donnelly.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Mia's here to say thank you, and her
Yes.
mom and dad. Yeah, me? Yeah.
You're figment. You're figment.
So can we get Diane and the family and the board right now?
And Mia.
Hold Mia.
Perfect. She knows. Perfect. Oops. Oh, wait a minute. Mia, sit. Come on, Ed. Sit down. Mia. Are those bones over there?
Perfect.
Thank you. Mia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I knew I was a star. You're very welcome. I knew I was a star.
Come here, pretty girl.
You know, Jim, when we had that conversation, it was you that kind of pointed me where to go, because you knew her so well, and I concentrated in that area. There she was.
Would she wanna go swimming or something?
I think she probably had to.
She has.
That's great.
She was heading home, I said.
Awesome.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Mia.
Hi, Mia.
Thank you, that was very nice. Let's go to the board and committee interviews. We're gonna interview Whitney Boyle, correct? Wanna come up? Is there a motion?
Yes. I move to nominate Whitney Boyle to the Harbor Advisory Committee for a term to expire on June 30th, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second. Any further discussion? Okay. Whitney, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight.
Could you just give us a little bit of background of we obviously we have your stuff in the packet, but
Sure.
for everyone else here, just a little about your background and what brought you to this to apply for this position.
Sure, absolutely. I am 33 years old. I'm a small business owner out of Danvers. I've grown, born and raised in Rockport. I first heard actually about the committee through my friend Dave Stillman, and he had mentioned that it was tough to get members to the committee to be able to make decisions, and so that might be a nice spot for me to join. I've always been in water sports in Rockport. My mother taught swimming lessons for the town on Front Beach for pretty much my whole entire childhood. So I spent a lot of time there. That's when I actually met the harbor masters to begin with and formed a relationship then. My business is actually scuba diving. So my father had owned the business since the year I was born. So I was kind of brought up in the water constantly, whether on boats or on the beach. And I actually took over his business, so it is the same one. Don't own a boat myself, but many friends own that. So I feel like I'm pretty immersed in the community as well as, in the water area. So I felt like it might be a good committee for me to join to help them and to, give back to the community.
Great, great. You live here in town, of course.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
What do you see, what's on your radar screen?
Well, to be honest, not a whole lot quite yet. I'm still kind of learning what the committee is going over when it comes to, agendas. Really, I'm just hoping to be able to move through those a little bit quicker, hopefully with my help. But there's not one thing that I'm specifically looking to do. I think it's just general, whatever comes up, let's just get things going and moving.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Great.
Great.
Anyone else?
Thank you for volunteering.
Yes,
thank you.
absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited.
We're lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, you heard the motion. It's been seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, 0, and the motion passes 4-0.
Just one note before that is that there's a meeting tomorrow night.
Yes,
So I think it's at 6 o'clock tomorrow night, correct?
yes, it is.
Perfect.
And I
So-
didn't know,
Right here.
I just had one question about if I would be a formal member by then, or I would just sit in as an outsider still.
So still not formally on the committee yet. The board will vote at their next regular meeting to formally appoint you.
Gotcha, okay, excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Any other board or committee interviews? I don't think we have any. Selectmen briefings, the planning board, one of my favorite boards. Come on up.
Thank you. You all know me, but for those who don't, I'm Jason Shaw. I'm the chairman of the Rockport Planning Board. And this is one of the kind of regular briefings that I like to make to this board, just to know what we're doing. And also, obviously, some of it would involve you. So I have a couple of things. I'll be brief. First is that we have for the Springtown meeting a proposed bylaw change, which is going to be having a public hearing, which has already been advertised for February 6th. And essentially, it clarifies an existing provision in the bylaws which has been subject to interpretation in a way that, by town council, in a way that I think the board members of the planning board did not anticipate. And basically what this is it involves side yard setbacks, meaning the setbacks on the side yards, not the front yard, not the backyard, but the side yards. And back in 2015, the I was not on the board at the time, but the planning board drafted a bylaw that was approved at town meeting, which essentially said that if your house is over 4,000 square feet, you have to have a 20-foot side yard setback as opposed to the standard 10-foot side yard setback, meaning you had to have 20 feet from the boundary line of your neighbor's property. And if your house was over 6,000 square feet, that number increased to 25 feet. The issue that arose was how to deal with what they call accessory structures. Accessory structures are things like garages, sheds, outbuildings, and whether those the square footage of those buildings is to be included to arrive at your threshold 4,000 and 6,000 square feet numbers. Well, the planning board was of the view, the people who drafted this bylaw, that it should be included when you calculate that number. But the building inspector read it differently and believed that it wasn't included. So, long story short, our town council reviewed it, initially agreed with the planning board, but then changed their mind and agreed with the building inspector. So, as it stands now, the square footage is only the square footage of the residence. So that the planning board, we've redone the bylaw. I think we've made it better. We've redone the definition of what is gross floor area or square footage. And those are going to be on for a public hearing and hopefully for a vote on April 4. So that's one thing that we're doing. The other thing that has come up fairly recently is the issue of kind of a big review of the zoning bylaws. No, the zoning bylaws have, for at least a decade, probably longer, have really not been subject to review by a professional planner. And what's happened is over the years there have been additions, deletions, by the members of the planning board who are generally lay people. And what we have now is kind of a zoning bylaw that's been put together in a piecemeal way. Mm-hmm. There are inconsistencies, there are lack of definitions, and recently the board is, we're not very busy right now, which, depending on your view, is good or bad. We don't have a lot of activity. So, but this is a great time for us to take a look at something like this. And I've spoken with Mitch about this, and we have money in the budget to start it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take a stab at an RFP. I'm going to then send it off to Mitch and have it refined. And we're going to look for a planner, not to assist us on a monthly basis, which we were initially looking for, but to look for a planner to help us really as a project to look at the bylaws, kind of the 10,000-foot view, and make revisions that we believe are required to make them consistent and up to date. And that's, you know, that's a fairly big project, but it's one that's really badly needed. And so that's a big step, and it's something that you'll be hearing from us in the future. Kind of as related to this is the fact that and I applaud Mitch for this, is that the Bylaw and Governance Committee, which, you know, deals with all the bylaws other than our bylaws, although some of the bylaws that affect planning, like the lighting bylaw, are in the non-zoning bylaws. They've been essentially revived because they haven't been doing much. There hasn't been any meeting or anything for quite some time. And they've got some great people on that committee now, several lawyers, retired judge. It's going to be a great committee. They're going to be meeting on a regular basis. And they're going to be doing essentially what we're looking at doing for the zoning bylaws for hopefully for all the other bylaws in the town. So this is, in my view, and I'll put my 2 cents in now because this is a little bit beyond planning, but, and I mentioned this to Mitch, is that it seems to me that it's really time for this town to take a look at actually creating a code of bylaws for the town. Not what we have now, which is kind of a piecemeal thing with numbering is out of order. Sometimes things that get approved by a town meeting don't end up in the bylaws, which is what we're finding, that actually bylaws that or regulations that were approved at town meeting never got into the bylaws. We need to have a real code that people can read, that they can rely on, that's current. And I mentioned to Mitch a company that I have worked with when I was a practicing lawyer. It's actually out of New York, but they're all over the country. It's called General Code, and they actually come in. They do a full review of your legal provisions in your bylaws. They go back to see how they were enacted to make sure they were properly adopted, and they create a sequentially numbered code with all the bylaws, general and zoning, in one book, and it's current, and it's electronic, so someone can look at it online and look up something electronically, and it's a great thing for any community that takes its laws seriously to do. It obviously costs money, but it's money that would be well spent, especially initially, to get it done, and then once it's done, it's just a matter of updating it on an annual basis.
Any idea how much?
I have no idea. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with, Paul, the size of the community, the size of the legislation.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't imagine
And where would it
Rockport
come
would.
from? We'd have to discuss where would it come from, but
Yeah, well, I mean, that's something to discuss. But that's something that, I've talked with Mitch about it, and
Okay.
it's something that we'll follow up on.
Great.
And I'm sure they'd be happy to come here and look at what we have and
do a
give us,
proposal. Yeah.
give us a number.
Okay. good.
But it's very, very important for a community to have laws that, for a lot of reasons, so people know what the law is, so they can follow it, so it can be enforced properly. All those things are really important.
Indeed.
And so that's kind of the next thing that we're working on, and that's my report.
Great. Well, thank you. With the
I
two
have-
questions,
Denise.
Selectman Donnelly,
Yes, thank you.
can you take over from there?
So with the zoning bylaw review, which this all sounds like a great idea, I guess I would like us to, excuse my voice,
Understood.
undertake a review that looks at bylaws that maybe we should have that we don't. So looking at comparable towns, seaside towns like Manchester, Marblehead, Provincetown, and maybe surface for us some areas to consider that it occurred to anyone here. So I know there are things that I mentioned to you like area of permeable surfaces. is one area that I'd like to see us look at. I'm sure there are plenty of others that other towns have adopted that we may or may not want to adopt, but without knowing what's out there, it's impossible to say. Is that something that you think you could incorporate into your review?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually exactly one of
Oh,
the
okay.
things we're looking at. It's kind of the unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
We don't even know enough to know that they're
what we
there.
don't have.
What's- yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what hopefully, and I think we'll be able to get a good planner for this, because unlike trying to find someone who
Yeah.
comes in every month and sits there for 3 hours,
Right.
we're going to
Right.
get someone with a finite task,
Yep.
with, laid out, this is how much, and this is how much, we're going to pay you for it.
Okay.
And one of the things they're going to do is not only look at what's there, but like you said, Denise, look at what maybe should be there
Right.
that isn't
Yeah.
there.
Right.
So that's a project that is, I think, well worth doing. That's in the purview of the planning board, and we'll end up with, forget anything kind of controversial like the TOD or something like
Yeah.
that. This is simply nuts and bolts
Right.
zoning stuff that we need to look at and maybe redo. And no one can say now that the town of Rockport's zoning bylaws are up to date, that they're current. They
Yeah.
reflect current planning considerations, because
Right.
they don't. They were done decades ago,
Right,
before
right.
anybody was around here. And
Right.
It's time to take a look at them again.
Great.
Good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I'm not taking public questions. Yes.
So what's the status of the potential subdivide up on Drumlin Road? Is that still on the board, or has that fallen by the wayside and they've withdrawn their application? I haven't heard anything, and I haven't been to the last couple of meetings.
Ruth, they withdrew their application.
Okay.
Months ago, and we have not received anything to indicate that application would be resubmitted. So, who knows what the thinking was there,
Yeah.
but
Hopefully that's a win-win for everyone.
that's kind of where it is right now.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay,
Thank you,
let's move
Jason.
on to the consent agenda. Acceptance of a resignation of Russell Sandfield from the Board of Health.
Well, it's all one. It's all.
Yes,
And
that's,
and the
yeah.
appointment of,
I move that the board approve all non-held items on the consent agenda.
seconded?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, 0. The motion passes 4-0. And Selectmen and Town Administrators updates and liaison reports. Mitch.
Mr. Chair, several items to bring to the board's attention. Been a busy couple of weeks. So first, we've had some outreach from Congressman Moulton's office. He's interested in having a congressional town hall here in town. He's been trying to do some of those throughout the district.
Cool.
The 8th, right?
So it's bumped a bit. He's looking now to do potentially on the 29th of February. So it would be a discussion with the selectmen beforehand for 20 or 30 minutes,
Sure.
and then a 1-hour open forum. So I wanted to poll the board first on that.
On the 29th?
That's a Saturday?
Yes, it's Saturday.
That would be where the,
It's still TBD. I wanted to make
Okay.
sure the board was
Yep.
comfortable with that timing.
I'm
So it would be also, there was actually an issue at their last open forum they did with the pre-meeting with the selectmen. So just to be clear now,
Oh, yeah.
it'll be an open session. There is not an executive session
Right.
exemption for it. So
8th would.
the 8th
no longer.
is out. His schedule has changed, and if the board is comfortable, we would do February 29th.
Okay.
Any issues from the board?
No, why would there have been an executive session on that?
So he was meeting privately with the boards of selectmen and administrators beforehand, and someone tried to, in another town in his district, a reporter tried to go in, and one of his staff members stopped them and said, no, it's a private discussion. Again, they're not familiar with the open meeting law. It's not in their typical wheelhouse, so it was a misunderstanding. But just to put that out there now, because it did hit the paper a little bit, there is no exemption that would qualify, so we would have a open discussion
Yeah.
on it.
And what time did you say on the 29th?
That would be 9:30 to 10, and 10 to 11 would be the open forum.
Okay.
So the next item, we'll go ahead and finalize and schedule that and get a meeting location. The next item the board has in front of them, a list of special topics for calendar year 2020 first quarter. Chair and Vice Chair and I met after the last meeting to try to lay some of the pressing topics out. Again, all these are subject to change if something fluctuates a bit, but the tentative plan now is here as you see it. 2 added meetings. The first one being next Tuesday would be the planned budget workshop for the board to review and potentially sign off on the budget to move forward to Finance Committee. So that would be an added meeting. I'm particularly highlighting that one. February, at the meetings, we'd look to address the tree policy and marine fueling. March, we do an emergency services division update, and on the 10th, we are tentatively planning to finalize the promotion for Lieutenant Marino in the police department. Now that the civil service exam has cleared, we'd be looking to do that. 24th would be annual town meeting preparation. There is a planned executive session regarding real estate, namely Long Beach, for March 7th. That would be an added meeting. So that's basically quarter one and what we're looking at, hitting some of these. We talked about getting some of these needing to be timely and move forward on it. So that would be the plan. If there's no objection from the board, we'll proceed with finalizing these and inviting, in the marine fueling case, inviting the appropriate committees. And
On the 25th of February for the marine fueling, do we have every stakeholder that we need?
that would be the plan. We'll hit everybody. We'll probably add a few extras,
that,
but
you know-
the ones who truly need to opine on this with the board are Granite Pier Committee, Harbor Advisory, and the Harbor Masters.
Okay,
What
ma-
about-
so they're here at the table because if we're making decisions or about to make decisions.
Yes,
I want
so-
to make sure that everyone is there.
We'll
I'm not
we'll
taking
also
question-
be
I'm not taking
inviting,
questions.
we'll also be inviting representatives from Conservation, from
Yeah, that was my question.
Thatcher Island, and DPW commissioners.
Okay,
Okay.
as long as everyone is at the table so that we can't, if we make a decision that, we weren't invited. so we
Yeah,
don't
so,
want that. Okay.
and my suggested goal for you that evening would be, do you want to do it or not? And then potentially narrowing down some options based on the feedback that you get from the
But we won't
the
be
bodies.
voting at that
No,
meeting.
no, but it would be at least trying to set a little bit of direction.
Yea or nay.
and
We need
narrow-
direction
Yeah,
on this
yeah,
thing.
Yeah, I think that the goal would be, let's try to set a path in this particular case.
Yep.
I, I think to add the planning board too would be a good
Sure.
one.
Yep.
I want to make sure we get all the right people, but let's not
Right.
get it
Too big.
too big, because when it gets too big, you know how things get.
Yeah.
We
yeah.
want to make sure that all the stakeholders, and obviously it's a public hearing and so, a public meeting and so forth.
Public meeting,
Want to
yes.
make
Yeah.
sure everyone that needs to be there, but people who don't need to be there, they
Right.
can come naturally. But, I just want to make sure all the stakeholders are there.
One concern that I would have as far as at least the marine fueling facility is concerned, at the last meeting that we had that was at the community
house.
center, community house, it was packed. So I don't know if a venue change would be proper or necessary. I tend to think that it would be, because that's going to be something that will attract a lot of people, something to consider.
Okay. Certainly. So if there's no objection to any of this, we'll look to try to solidify all of it, and with particular attention for the board on those two added meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So additionally, following up on some comments from the chair of the planning board with government and bylaw committee, so they have picked back up. We had a very good meeting. Last week, we had Lauren Goldberg, the managing attorney from KP Law, present. She's their specialist on form of government, bylaw, charter, et cetera. It was a longer meeting, but I think very productive. It gave some, she gave some very good guidance on moving the process forward. We'll be utilizing her services to do an initial walkthrough, so that the plan now The individual members will give me their individual markups on the Code of Bylaws as they see them now, highlights, concerns, questions. We'll compile those, send those up to Lauren, and then she will do a walkthrough. She'll have their folks do a pass-through. That's when they'll be able to flag, you may want to consider this, and this based on what's out there. So basically what the planning consultant would do in that particular case, she'll be doing for the Code of Bylaws. So we'll be getting that process going.
Great.
They have a meeting this Thursday, the 23rd at 2 p.m. in this room. They're also now able to be a bit more proactive now that they're staffed to meet with those who would like some assistance on petition bylaws or any potential articles coming forward for town meeting. We know of one that's already in the queue and that was just sent to them in a packet, the balloon bylaw.
Oh,
Was just
yeah.
sent to them to review, so there'll
Yeah.
be representatives here to
Good.
talk about that. They've made some significant adjustments
Good.
to it. And the overarching goal is to start to get things in a particular style and internally try to codify things a little bit better. Part of that discussion will be, do we want to look at having a company potentially codify things? There's the one that the planning board chair referenced, there's one that Gloucester uses a different one. So there are a couple of options out there, so that'll be part of that discussion, but at a minimum, looking at a style guide so that when things come forward, people will have clear expectations on how to formulate it. So that is going again, and that was a good meeting, and I think we're in really good shape moving forward with that. The next item, as an FYI, will be the board will see something in a few weeks once the budget gets submitted, and I can turn a little bit more to this. One of my plans for calendar year 2020 is to start to look a little bit at strategic planning and to do some preparation on that so that the board can make some of the larger decisions and direction on things. So we're trying to gear up internally to have everything we need to be supportive for the board to start looking at the vision and some strategic objectives to move forward. So we'll be convening a senior management group with some of the senior department heads to start to brainstorm a structure and a framework so that we can look to come to the board realistically probably right after town meeting, I think. If we can do it a little bit before, if things are tied up with the budget and the warrant, we will, to start that process and to get thinking about how we can solicit some input and feedback, and with the end goal of developing a 3 to 5 year strategic plan
Great.
with some of the larger directional items. So happy to hopefully be able to move that shortly under the board's direction.
As promised in your interview.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
When did we
great.
update it last?
We don't have one.
We
don't
don't?
have a
Oh,
spreadsheet.
No.
okay.
So this would be,
Yes, it
this
needs
is
to-
the plan, and that's why a lot of it is
Yeah.
foundational, so we're trying
Yep.
to calibrate
Yep.
some of the department heads so they can be supportive of it as
Right.
well.
Yep.
3 to 5 years is the goal on it, and I think we all kind of know individually what we would say are the top 3 or 4 issues, and it'll start to tease some of that out and how we can move forward as a town and set some direction so that when we're faced with some of these larger topics, there'll be a guiding set to vision to follow
Yep.
for that the
Great.
board will have reviewed, and that will have public input in an
Great.
appropriate process.
Great.
That's all I have for the moment. I have more when we get to the budget piece.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Update since last week.
Oh, jeepers, I have a few. Okay, so DPW Commissioners meeting, that was held last week, I think. Had a good talk about all kinds of things, mostly budget-related, some stuff they had put in for capital. Had a good discussion of that. They had sample bags of the new trash bags they're going to hopefully go to. They're sort of like the one that Gloucester has. Several people took them and are trying them, so that's a good thing. And I'm not sure when we're starting with the new ones, but we are working on that. Board of Health, Ron Newman, the new member, started. That was last week also. That was a busy meeting. They're working on a succession plan because they have several members who are retiring. So they're kind of looking at that. Council on Aging was tonight at 5 o'clock. That is going gangbusters. They're going to start some more fitness groups up there. They're just busting at the seams with lots of activity, trips, things like that. Very, very busy. I'm very impressed with them. DPW Building Committee is tomorrow at 10 a.m. and we will be discussing the two applications for the owner's project manager for the DPW facility. And we'll be thinking of questions to ask them and probably having them come in each one on the 29th, since there are only two of them. And just looking at ways to maybe start a website telling about the DPW facility, progress, etc. And CPC I went to tonight for a very short time. I talked to them about the Tyler Silver House and our proposal of what we hope to do to see if we can have it gifted by the state to the town and see if we can find a lot to move it to preserve it for affordable housing if it's affordable to do so by the building inspector. He has looked at it. Mitch, the building inspector, and I and the people from the state went over and looked at it and toured it inside and out last week. It does have a lot of work to be done, and I truthfully am not sure it's viable to be able to be saved, but if we can, we want to save it, and we would like to have it moved and used for affordable housing if we could, instead of being torn down, which they feel they have to do to open up the access and the aesthetic of Halibut Point and the opening area of it. So we've been working on that. CPC applications are due February 3rd at 4 p.m. at the town clerk's office. They have to be stamped in by then for this coming year's cycle. So I encourage everyone to get their applications in. CIPC, I'm the chairperson of that. We had our final meeting of the departments last week, which was with the DPW, which has the biggest request amounts. And like Toby said, they were asking over $3 million for Long Beach, $700,000 for road repairs. They had a lot of big ticket items. So we will be meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock to go over again at CIPC, looking at what we think we can afford this year from which ones, and what ones can come from other areas like water enterprise, sewer enterprise, ambulance fund, harbor masters, different other accounts, not just from the money we have in excess that we can use for things like that. So we'll be kind of looking at all of that tomorrow at the 1 o'clock meeting. And I think that's it. It's been a busy couple of weeks.
Yeah, indeed. Anyone else? Hearing none, let's move on to the discussion items of FY21 budgets, operating and capital. Mr. Vieira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as discussed into the report section, the budget workshop will be next Tuesday. We'll plan to do 6:30, and we'll have the usual setup here, and I plan to follow the format that I utilized last year with the PowerPoint, distilling it down, highlighting some of the different changes. So if that worked, I'm seeing head nods, that I'll continue with that plan. So we will have, as Selectman George indicated, we'll hopefully we will be wrapping up CIPC shortly. On the operating budget side, we're in a holding pattern on two items. The state aid information, which is not overly critical at the moment. We expect that we'll either get that. The plan is that the governor is filing his preliminary budget tomorrow, but if we don't get what we need tomorrow, we expect that we'll hear it during the keynote session at the MMA conference on Friday. He usually goes to that and shares. He likes to share the amount at that, and so we expect by the end of the week we'll know at least where state aid lands, first pass. Generally speaking, it's been very stable. They reached some revenue consensus numbers a week or two ago, I think, at this point, and they're projecting on the state level revenue increases of 2.83%. So again, they've agreed that executive branch, House and Senate. In the past, our state aid increases have been somewhat reflective of that number, but we'll wait and see. We certainly have to wait and see. The significant piece that we're really waiting on is the health insurance number. So at the moment, we're carrying 7%, which has things based on a level funded budget out of balance. So we expect that we'll have some better information next week. At least we're hoping a tighter band to work from. The Maya Board of Directors is meeting on Saturday of the MMA weekend, as they usually do, and they take some preliminary votes. So we expect shortly thereafter to have some better idea on that. And that's really holding our process at the moment. We're also preparing to work with the school on the override, which their final number is also waiting on this health insurance piece. We're all trying to see where health insurance lands. Based on the formula that's in place, health insurance premiums, increases over 5%, trigger some changes with the school's budget.
We haven't discussed it at school committee yet, but I assume that the stance will be not to adjust the amount that's already been put out for the override. If the insurance is higher, then the legs of that amount of money for the override would just be reduced, because there are 2 or 3 things going on from the state level that sort of give it a little more power, such as reimbursement for sped transportation and circuit breaker, which we did not figure in. So I think the number will remain the number we've been working with, and won't be adjusted by $50 or $60 or $100,000 because of an insurance change. Just be basically saying the legs are a little weaker possibly, but maybe not, and what would be there. I don't think it's going to be our stance to adjust that number to
Just a question.
take
if
care
I
of
may.
Yes, go right ahead.
insurance.
Sure.
Just a question.
Insurance could be, as problematic next year or more so.
Yep.
Therefore, it affects the legs of the override too. We haven't had that discussion, but I think that's what they'll take as a stance.
Yeah, so Rob, is the extra funding, is that from the education bill that just passed, that you're anticipating?
Promise Act,
Right.
appropriate name right now.
And when does that take effect?
Governor Baker has signed it. They haven't discussed the mechanisms for some of the things, especially that transportation reimbursement.
Right.
There's a regional meeting on February 7th for all business managers, where Jay Sullivan, who's the business guru for the state, will be talking about the mechanism of how you report that, and what will be the actual sort of lay of the land in terms of how much money would get back.
Okay.
Regardless, in year 1, it only has 25% potential, and then in the second year it goes to 50, third year it goes to 75, fourth year it goes to 100, and the override is supposed to be a 4 or 5 year kind of window, so by the time you got to 100% reimbursement on transportation, that would really add crutches to your
Right.
legs in an override,
Right.
so to speak, because it would become real money. It could be
Yeah.
$200,000 that
Yep.
right now we would be saying we don't have in the present world we live in.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
So we, I'm sorry, I just have a couple of other, Mr. Chair, if I may, a couple of other items. We are looking at and anticipate doing some right sizing for staffing in some departments and some adjustments. I don't want to get into specifics on that at the moment yet, but they'll be certainly ready one way or another for the 28th. But there are some things that, regardless of how our number falls, we can make some adjustments that are suitable based on operations. So I expect that there will be some changes in those areas.
And at some point, we need to look at, different positions, people leaving
And that's
do
what we've been
we,
doing. That is exactly what we're doing, and you'll see some of that on the 28th.
Good.
Some adjustments that we've started to look at to right size staffing.
Good.
Again, as I indicated, everybody was instructed to level fund. You will see some departments who've gone outside of that, naturally, contractual obligations. So the one that really will stand out when you see it will be the police departments. But that is because we have multiple years being addressed in one budget as we've addressed it. So I say that now so that it's not a shock when you look at it. I shared that with the Finance Committee as well. We've agreed as a town on that, and we're in good shape, better shape for it moving forward. But numerically, that number will look larger. And we have a few other items.
Because of
The
The
negotiation.
negotiated
negotiations
contractual
with the
increase.
unions.
Cor-
And
Correct, so
anything
the
else
staffing
that-
number,
Only unions? Or-
the staffing number for the police will look larger than the standard COLA,
Right.
because we're accommodating all these different adjustments that were part of the negotiated
Yeah, but it's
process.
only within the unions, of course.
Only for the police department.
Yeah, okay.
Specifically for
Yep,
those
okay, yep,
changes.
now I get it.
We will be also moving ahead, again, subject to what that final number looks like with a planned COLA for non-union staff, which would match what the union number is. That's our plan right now. Again, we need to see where this final health insurance number falls, or at least gets us to a tighter band. So when it does come on the 28th, it will be balanced for the board to consider, and we will have a plan laid out to adjust accordingly up or down based on what that final number looks like as it works through the process with the Finance Committee. We worked through, we'll utilize the same method on that end as we did last year. That worked out well, that we had some contingency plans in place to address any changes that came up. And so those are the high-level items I wanted to just bring to your attention now. We'll certainly have much more detail and some things that are a little more finalized for Tuesday.
Thank you, Mitch. Obviously, we have plenty of money. You know, we're gonna be able to spend everything we need.
I wish.
What do we want?
We are very fortunate on the capital end
Yeah.
this year. The work that we did
Yeah.
internally to address the shortfall last year resulted in a very healthy, highest actually amount we've had
Good job.
free cash. So we're grateful for the work that everyone did to make that work.
Please express our gratitude to everyone for that.
Yes, please do. And obviously, it's a work in progress, so, good.
Great.
Anyone
Thank
else on budget and
No,
operating capital? Hearing none. Any other announcements or business? Anyone?
Nothing.
Okay, is there a motion to dismiss?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Moving second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Thank you.